Long time no see. You've been to Xinjiang back and forth over the past 5 to 8 years. Help us to understand. There are different versions about the history of Xinjiang in its relations with the rest of China. What is your version? Briefly, you can help us to understand this part of history.
Yeah, it's for more than 2,000 years. You already had the very close connection, but in different periods. Sometimes more close, sometimes not that close. I think we need to do some periodization of history. At the same time, we also need to see that history from different point of view. So multi-layers together with the integration. So you can have, for example, the historical documents. You have the Chinese documents for that history, narration of that regional history. And also you have the history, the documents from Uyghur and other languages, Mongolian and Tibetan language. So it's a really multi-layers narrative of that regions. At the same time, that multi-layers linked together is in a very complicated way.
Yes, indeed. And there are some recent developments in Xinjiang which sometimes fascinates people and sometimes could also cause some concerns. For example, the religious development in Xinjiang, there have been different kinds of influences coming from outside China and of course outside Xinjiang and having an impact on the population, particularly the Uyghur population.
Basically, there was a Uyghur used to be more like the religious people, the ethnic groups. Most of people were the Muslim. But traditionally speaking, it's more secular. Some people use the secular religion, or the religion with the more or less secular tendency. You know, that the everyday life was very colorful. It started from, I think, late 1980s. More and more influence from outside, from Middle East or the surrounding nations, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and so on and so forth. Some new trend spread over to this region.
More conservative, is that what you're saying?
More conservative, like Wahhabism and some other the schools.
And of course, these schools are very controversial internationally speaking.
Yes, right. Even within the ethnic groups, there were different. I mean, it's caused the tensions. So on the one hand, people used to perceive these phenomena from the division or the distinction between the secular or the religious, but actually the real situation is much more complicated because even within the religious world, you can find the tendencies. So on the one hand, after the 1980s, there was there was a rapid growth of the religions. For example, the mosques, the massive building construction of mosques. It's about the 23 or 24,000 mosques, in different types, of course, in Xinjiang. It's quite big and very dense, but it is only one problem of the rapid developments of the population and the mosques. Religious population. But at the same time, if you look into it, you can find the confrontation or the differences.
Like what?
I know some my Muslim friends who are also worried because their tradition was changed, even distorted by the newcomers. So that's the problem. So
what was their tradition? More secular traditions?
More secular, much more secular. You know that in the 1980s, even early 90s, it's almost the same as in other areas in China. That the more secular, modern search for the modernization. A lot of the fashions and the Uyghur people they are very capable in dancing, singing,
Absolutely.
and so on and so
Very
forth.
talented.
But now, if you look, especially in the southern Xinjiang, more or less the lifestyle, more or less conservative, and some people use the black garment and the veil. At the same time, in the countryside, especially some counties, it's very difficult to find the cigarette and the liquors.
And therefore, within the Muslim community themselves, how are they compromising or coping with one another? I mean, on the one hand, this is very strong secular tradition, and it seems from what you have just suggested, majority of them still want this secular tradition to be with them. On the other hand, there are some new phenomena not necessarily welcomed by the rest of the world, and also not necessarily by the majority of those Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and yet they still exist. So how is the Muslim community themselves compromise or accept or adjust themselves toward these very different kinds of development of the religion?
It's also quite complicated because there was a new tendency. And more or less, I think that why those people became, those kind of the conservative religions became so influential, partly because it was, to some extent, it was a reaction to the ongoing process that they are, to some extent, that, for example, the corruption or some social inequality and so on and so forth. And that, at the same time, that was not only because of the reasons inside of Xinjiang, but also the surrounding areas in global reasons. So it's complicated. A lot of the elites are worried about that, especially the last year when the Mara that in Kashgar was assassinated. A lot of people are worried about that. So certain kind, you can find the difference between among those people. Some elites worried about that. At same time, you can find some generational differences, because older generations, more or less, much more, to some extent, it's more secular. And the younger, a lot of people, young people, became radical and conservative.
You were giving a speech, in fact, a very academic speech at the Xinjiang University when you were there for this period of research. After all, you are a chair professor over there. Yeah. So you were talking about your concept from outside Xinjiang, looking at the social and also the political changes inside that region. How were the young Uyghurs sitting in the audience reacting to what you have just said?
Basically, my basic idea, maybe more too academic, I used two terms. One is that trans-systemic society. I perceived the Xinjiang, as well as China, as a trans-systemic society. We are the same society, we are a common society, living in that society. But we need to know that our society composed of the different people, different layers, so-called system, that their religions, languages, different customs, and different ethnicities. So all these we're living together, we communicated. Sometimes we are relatives, we are the friends, colleagues, and so on and so forth. So we are living in the common place. But on the other hand, we need to know that we need space for the tolerance of multiple identities. Now, the real danger is that they try to reduce that multiplicity of the identity into the one-dimensional. Either sometimes the people use the religious identity, ethnicity, or the ethnic identity, or the national identity to suppress other identities. So that was, from my point of view, it's dangerous. At the same time, you can see that in Xinjiang we have the more than 50 the ethnic groups.
Indeed, the Uyghur is only one of those ethnic minorities over there.
And 13 indigenous ethnic groups, including the Uyghurs, Han, and some Mongol,
Tajik,
and
Mongol, other Muslims as well.
Kazakhs. All those, they have the different beliefs and the language and so on and so forth. But for millenniums, they live together, right? It's full of the changes. So the multiple identity is very important. At the same time, we know that in Xinjiang, a lot of the ethnic groups, they have some other countries based on their ethnicities, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Russia, Mongolia, and so on and so forth. But not so much conflicts because of these. So which also shows that even the national identities and together with ethnic identities is not a big problem. All these problems became the conflicts. If that became clashed or the conflicts, we need to understand or reinterpret to study what's the real reason, rather than reduce all the conflicts into the multiple identities.
I see. Very interesting idea. Yeah. And how were the young students reacting to your theories?
Yeah, most of the people, I think they believe that because of course, they're worried about that. The students, some students from the Han Chinese or some other from different ethnic groups,
right.
They complained. They sometimes try to explain to me, for example, when they were the students in the primary school, middle school, they had a lot of the classmates from different ethnic groups. They are so close. But somehow the atmosphere changed. They talk each other, became more or less carefully. And a certain kind of the sense of tension were there. So that was changed. So I think we need to make some great efforts to change that atmosphere.
And Professor Wang, before we go, there's one very interesting and extremely important concept China is trying to promote and explore. That is One Belt, One Road, initiated by the Chinese President Xi Jinping together with his colleagues. The thing is, if that is likely to happen, Xinjiang is going to be at the very center of this concept,
right.
Because it is really the place linking the ancient Silk Road.
Yeah.
So what would that mean for the current realities in Xinjiang, and how much momentum would that bring to changes going on in Xinjiang, while at the same time respecting the diversity in that specific place? Your thoughts?
Yes. According to the policy that issued by the central government, we have the two core regions in the whole one project, One Belt, One Road. One is Xinjiang, another was Fujian. It's a maritime Silk Road, another continental Silk Road. For Xinjiang, at same time, it was very important, traditional Silk Road, and also the two corridors need to go there. One is that quite important Sino-Pakistan corridors and the Sino-Indian corridors, two corridors. So these were eventually together with what we call the Sino-European Bridge, that the European Asian Bridge, that the Red Road from the Xinjiang to Rotterdam. So it's so that's why I use the term that the belt, road, corridors, and the bridges to describe the theory, not only the economic or political projects. I think a certain kind of these concepts need to be rethink about, because basically it's about the interconnections. It's about the participation. Every aspect need to participate in that. We encourage different countries, right, along the Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road, to join these, commonly join these projects. We also need the support for the different ethnic groups inside of China. So in that case, I think it's very important for us not only think about the economic issues, the expansion of markets or the expansion of the finance and so on and so forth, but we also need to study the culture. The ethnic culture, religious culture, and the long history, together with the ecological conditions. So we need to think about the approach, that how to develop our economic developments together with the culture and the social development together.